Week 12 of the college football season has arrived, and with every week that goes on, the college football playoff race becomes more and more intensified. With only 4 more weeks until we find out who the 12 teams will be competing in the college football playoff, we are in the home stretch. This week, we have a plethora of matchups that can and will impact the college football playoff race. I am Johnny Sports Network, here to provide you with my Week 12 college football predictions. As I say a lot in the month of November, college football in November, chaos is inevitable, and every road game is a trap game. However, I think it can be even more simplified that every game is a trap game, even if you are the home team. Because some of the big headlines from week 11, Memphis, the front runner for the group of 5 playoff bid, upset at home against Tulane. We also had ACC contenders, Virginia and Louisville, be upset this week at home. We also had Indiana survive and advance against Penn State on the road, a Penn State team with nothing to lose but a lot to gain. Oregon surviving and advancing against Iowa on the road in a game where it was a very sloppy field in a low-scoring game. Ohio State and Texas A&M dominant in their wins this week. The Tide keep on rolling since the week 1 loss against Florida State. Perhaps the most surprising headline from week 11, Wisconsin, a team that has been struggling. They upset Washington in a low-scoring game. I'll address this in my takeaways from college football from this past week, later on in the week, but Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, without a doubt, had his Heisman moment on that final drive of the game. That entire last drive, he was completely poised and did not panic, did not get flustered at all. And it concluded with Omar Cooper Jr. with the catch of the season. What does week 12 have in store for us? As mentioned, a plethora of matchups that can and will impact the college football playoff race. The 7 games on the docket for the main 7 this week: NC State and Miami, Virginia and Duke, TCU and BYU, Iowa and USC, Notre Dame and Pittsburgh, Oklahoma and Alabama, and concluding with my game of the week, Texas and Georgia. Without further ado, let's get to the Week 12 college football predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. The first game on the docket this week, NC State and Miami. NC State's season has been a roller coaster. They started the season 3-0, a big win against Virginia, but then they ended up losing 4 out of their next 5 games, with the one win being non-FBS competition. But then, the last time we saw NC State on the football field, they upset Georgia Tech. Miami entered the season as one of the favorites in the ACC. In fact, they were at the minimum second in line behind Clemson. The main talking points for Miami this season was acquiring Carson Beck in the transfer portal and Miami's revamped defense. Last year, it was a liability. This year, they're 11th in total defense, only giving up 285.1 yards per game. Carson Beck, I've talked time and time again throughout the season, Miami will go as far as Carson Beck takes them. Will we get the good Carson Beck or the bad Carson Beck? Twice this season, we've gotten the bad Carson Beck. At home against Louisville and on the road against SMU. Against Louisville, he threw 4 interceptions. And against SMU, he threw 2 interceptions, including 1 in overtime. And before those games, there was arguments on should Miami be the number 1 team because they at one point had the best resume in the entire country. Carson Beck is currently sitting at 15 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions on the season. Miami is 7th in time of possession. NC State, 27th in total offense, averaging just over 438.5 yards a game. These are 2 teams this season that have not been reliable against the spread this season. Miami's 5-4, NC State 4-5. I'm going to be honest, I am surprised that Miami is favored by more than 2 touchdowns in this game. And I'm not saying Miami is overrated. I'm talking about in the sense of how close ACC games have been this season. If last week showed anything, it's that even home games in November are trap games. NC State, they have nothing to lose this point, but Miami, they have everything to lose. Miami still has a slim chance of making the playoff, but a loss would put them out of contention. I think outright Miami does win this game. However, I think NC State, I think they keep it close enough to cover. If Miami were to lose this game, it would not be surprising at all because Miami being upset in November, it is a common occurrence. But I think they just get past NC State in this one. I think at the most by a touchdown because I just think NC State, they have found some new momentum with their upset win against Georgia Tech a couple of weeks ago. Virginia and Duke, both teams looking to respond and get back in the win column after losses last week. Virginia with the loss at home against Wake Forest, quarterback Chandler Morris, he exited the game in the first half, did not return, and Virginia ended up losing in a low-scoring game. The offense could not get much going. Duke upset on the road against an underrated UConn team. Going into the games last week, Duke was favored in this game by about 4.5, 5.5 points. But with Chandler Morris injured for Virginia, it's gone up to 6.5. And regardless, I anticipated Duke would be favored in this game. This is another one of those games where the lower ranked team is favored against a ranked team. Or in this instance, unranked Duke, a 4-loss Duke team, is favored against Virginia. A couple times earlier in the season, I had talked about how I felt that Duke was starting to reach their full potential after the second half against Tulane. The early highlight of Duke's season was week 2 against Illinois. They started the game strong, but then turnovers, they set themselves back in that game with those turnovers. About 5 turnovers in that game. Then later on, struggling against Tulane, but then they rally in the second half, but they're unable to win. Then we saw Duke start to show their full potential. They were competitive against Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech dominant in the second half. Both of these teams are currently in the top 35 in total offense. Virginia's 35th, Duke is 20th. Defensively, Duke is 104th in total defense, allowing over 406 yards a game. I do think that this is an element that will come into play in this game. Duke on the season, they are 4th in fourth down conversion percentage. Defensively, Virginia is 7th in third down defense. Opponents are only converting on third down against the Cavaliers 28.7% of the time. The question is, what is the status of Virginia quarterback Chandler Morris? As I have not seen anything. I haven't seen anything regarding his status for the game this week. However, I was going to pick Duke regardless of how last week played out. Regardless if Duke would have won against UConn or not, regardless if Virginia would have found a way to win last week, I was always going to pick Duke in this game because I just have been impressed with what I've seen from Duke in this later portion of the season. Quarterback Darian Mensah is towards the top as far as passing yards on the season. If Chandler Morris is able to return for Virginia this week, I think Virginia does cover the 6.5. Although I anticipate that it will go down to maybe 4.5 like it was originally. Either way, though, I think Duke wins outright. TCU and BYU, both teams looking to respond after losses last week. TCU at home against Iowa State, BYU on the road against Texas Tech. TCU quarterback Josh Hoover, 2,690 passing yards on the season, 9th in the FBS. His go-to guy this season, wide receiver Eric McAllister, 834 receiving yards, 9th in the FBS. Last week, BYU only ran 9 plays in Texas Tech territory. The question is it revealing that BYU has been overrated this whole time, or that Texas Tech defensively is an absolute juggernaut? I would say more that Texas Tech is just a juggernaut defensively, and Texas Tech, another conversation for another day, but Texas Tech, I'd say, is one of the most balanced teams in the entire country. BYU did about everything they could defensively, but their offense just could not get going until it was too late. BYU 16th in scoring defense, giving up 18.33 points a game. BYU, I would say, has one of the more underrated wide receiver cores in the entire country. Chase Roberts, 38 catches, 652 yards, 5 touchdowns. Parker Kingston, 39 receptions, 554 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. TCU is 38th in total offense. Defensively, TCU is statistically about average, maybe slightly above average. They're around in the 60s. TCU is 14th in third down conversion percentage. And if you want to win on the road, you're going to have to convert on third down very frequently to extend drives. Up until last week, I would say the majority of the last couple of seasons, time and time again, BYU, they have found ways to win games. If this BYU team was not as disciplined, not as resilient as they are, BYU could easily be 4-5 right now. And again, it's not me saying that BYU is overrated. It's more they're resilient and disciplined. It doesn't matter how you win or how many you win by, just win, especially this late in the season. BYU currently favored by 6.5 is very interesting. If TCU would have been able to handle business against Iowa State, an Iowa State team that was struggling on a losing streak, this would have most likely been a top 25 matchup this week. This feels like a game where BYU wins by one possession like they have time and time again the last couple of seasons. I'm taking BYU to win, but not to cover. I think TCU keeps this to within a field goal game, even though this game is in Provo. Iowa and USC. Iowa competed well against Oregon last week. Their defense kept them in the game from start to finish. It was the kind of game that fell into Iowa's favor, with it being a low-scoring game. But Oregon, they won the game with a last-second field goal, and Iowa, their third loss of the season, but they are a pretty good three-loss team as they competed well against Indiana earlier in the season. Up until last week, Iowa competed the best out of anyone that played against Indiana. Now Iowa goes on the road against USC. USC second in the FBS in total offense, averaging 503.2 yards a game. Quarterback Jaden Mayava, 10th in the FBS in passing yards, and he's second in QBR. USC is 7th in scoring offense, averaging 39.6 points per game. For Iowa, once again this week, the story is, can their defense keep them in the game? Iowa, they contained Indiana's offense really well. They contained Oregon's offense well. This time, they're on the road. Those two games, they were at home. Iowa's 5th in scoring defense, averaging 13.7 points per game given up. They're 4th in total defense, only giving up 250.2 yards per game. The two big factors for Iowa's success, their defense, which I have mentioned, and their discipline. Iowa has only accumulated 20 penalties this season, the least in the FBS. That is what you need if you want to pull off an upset on the road. You can't be playing behind the chains. The more often you're playing behind the chains, the louder the crowd is going to get. And this should be a ranked game. I do feel like the playoff committee should still keep Iowa in the top 25. The Iowa defense can be trusted, but can you trust the offense to do enough to win this game? I think it's possible they can. This game, to me, it feels like it can be a 24-17 game. Despite how good USC's offense has been this season, their defense hasn't exactly been great. I do have USC winning slightly. I think they slightly just win by more than 6.5. 7-point game. Iowa's defense has really shown up over the years. They've kept Iowa in games, but their offense has let them down time and time again. I think it happens again this weekend. I think USC wins by just a touchdown. They win by 7 to just cover the 6.5. Notre Dame and Pittsburgh, I mentioned last week, and I've mentioned a couple times in recent weeks, that this game right here for Notre Dame, this is their last obstacle for making the college football playoff. If they get past Pittsburgh this week, I am putting them in the college football playoff remaining schedule. Syracuse, who's been disappointing this season, and Stanford. But this is a Pittsburgh team that I don't think many people are talking about. Pittsburgh is currently on a 5-game winning streak. Ever since they changed quarterbacks, Pittsburgh has been winning games. Eli Holstein started the season, but they put in Mason Heinstiel, the freshman, 1,511 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, but he's been sacked 16 times. Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love, 988 rushing yards this season, 5th in the FBS. Notre Dame, they have climbed to 26th in the FBS in rushing offense, rushing for over 194 rushing yards a game. Both of these teams are in the top 10 in scoring offense. Pittsburgh is 6th. Notre Dame is 9th. Notre Dame, for weeks, their season has been on the line. Their playoff hopes been on the line. Every game has been a playoff game for Notre Dame. While Pittsburgh, I mentioned in my takeaways last week that Pittsburgh, I think, is going to be a team to watch throughout the remainder of this month. Pittsburgh is 25th in total defense, giving up 318.3 yards a game. Pittsburgh is 3rd in the FBS in rushing defense, giving up only 80.9 rushing yards a game. I've said it countless times, and I'll say it one more time. College football in November. Chaos is inevitable. Every road game is a trap game. Last week, the only top 10 team who lost was BYU against Texas Tech. So a top 10 team is going to lose no matter what. However, the upset monster is hungry for a top 10 team to be upset. And for me, I think that Notre Dame is the perfect candidate for the upset monster this week. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think Pittsburgh, they're at least going to cover in this game. You know what? College football in November, I'll take a chance. I'm going to take Pittsburgh to pull off the upset, even if Notre Dame ends up winning this game 56-7. It's fine. I really like taking chances in November, and I just think this Pittsburgh team is on a lot of momentum right now. And looking at Pittsburgh this season, they're a very underrated team that I don't think many people are taking as seriously as they should. And I'm going to go with them to pull off this upset and ending Notre Dame's playoff hopes. Oklahoma and Alabama. Oklahoma a couple weeks ago went on the road and upset Tennessee, while Alabama, they continue to roll. They are not letting the week 1 loss against Florida State define them or define their season. Kalen DeBoer has completely flipped the script. He has turned the tides with the narrative surrounding him. There were people after week 1 who said that Kalen DeBoer isn't the fit for Alabama. Kalen DeBoer isn't the kind of coach that Alabama needs. However, ever since then, he has completely silenced the doubters. He has them quiet for now. Against ranked opponents, Kalen DeBoer is 19-3. Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson, 21 touchdown passes, 1 interception on the season. Meanwhile, Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer, he has been struggling since his return from his thumb injury. 734 passing yards, 2 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions. There may be some people that will say, well, Oklahoma, they went on the road and upset Tennessee a couple weeks ago, so they have momentum. However, yes, Oklahoma, they did do a fairly good job at containing Tennessee's offense. However, Alabama does not have the lackluster defense that Tennessee has. And that was a big reason why I picked Oklahoma to win against Tennessee a couple weeks ago, was because Tennessee's defense could not be trusted, but Alabama's defense can be trusted. Alabama is 18th in total defense and 13th in scoring defense. Oklahoma, 7th in both scoring defense and total defense. And Oklahoma's defense and special teams is what carried them against Tennessee. Oklahoma is 4th in run defense, giving up about 82 rushing yards a game. Can Jam Miller get past Oklahoma's run defense? And how many times will Oklahoma appear in the red zone? Because Oklahoma is one of only 2 teams in the FBS to have scored on every red zone appearance this season. With Oklahoma having 2 losses on the season, 1 more loss and they are eliminated from playoff contention, this is a playoff-like game for Oklahoma. I've talked on multiple occasions how much I think John Mateer is underrated. I talked about him a lot last year when he was at Washington State, saying he was underrated. However, with Kalen DeBoer being 19-3 against ranked teams, and last week I also mentioned that Alabama is undefeated at home in the Kalen DeBoer era. I trust Oklahoma's defense in this game, but I don't think I can trust John Mateer enough, as he has been struggling since his return from thumb surgery. Plus, Ty Simpson, he is at least at the minimum 10 times the better quarterback than John Mateer is right now. As Ty Simpson, he's been efficient all year long, and I'm going to go with Alabama to continue rolling. I think Alabama wins this game by at least 10 points. And finally, the game of the week, Texas and Georgia, in what will, in all likelihood, be a top 10 matchup in Athens in prime time. A major talking point surrounding these 2 teams. For Texas, it has been the early struggles of Arch Manning. After week 1, there was talks about how Arch Manning is overrated, how Arch Manning is only a starting quarterback because he's a Manning. However, I even said after that game against Ohio State that it's an overreaction, and watching that game, Texas, they made so many mistakes in that game that they prevented themselves from winning that game. But then a couple weeks later against UTEP at home, Arch Manning was booed by the Texas fans. Then a couple weeks later against Florida in the Swamp, even though he threw 2 interceptions in that game, even though Texas lost that game, it was the start of Arch Manning showing what he's capable of. And then the next week, the Red River rivalry, Texas with a dominant win against Oklahoma. And if Texas ends up making the college football playoff and making a run, personally, we can look at that Red River rivalry game and say that was the moment that Texas season completely changed. Or that was the turning point of their season. In the last two games, Arch Manning has thrown for 674 passing yards, 6 touchdown passes, 1 interception. And the 1 interception is within the last 4 games. Even though Texas, they had to go to overtime against Kentucky and Mississippi State, Texas, they still won those games, survive, and advance. For Georgia, they have looked pretty vulnerable more often than what we've been used to seeing them. It looked like they were going to lose to Tennessee. They were down 8 late, but then Georgia is able to force overtime and win in overtime. They had their home game winning streak come to an end against Alabama. Then later on the season, they find themselves down by 9 in the fourth quarter against Ole Miss. They rally to win by 8. I should also mention that it looked like they were going to be trailing Auburn on the road 17-0 a week before the Ole Miss game, but then they were once again resilient and ended up scoring 20 unanswered points. Then against Florida, a gritty 24-20 win. And last week against a Mississippi State team on the road, a team that I have felt like is underrated. They found themselves trailing 7-0 early on, but then they went on to outscore Mississippi State 41-14. Georgia is 10th in time of possession. Both teams, they're in the top 25 in total defense. Georgia's 20th, Texas 22nd. A big key for me in determining who's going to win this game is going to be the running game. Because these are two teams in the top 15 in rushing defense. Texas second, giving up only 78.2 rushing yards a game. Georgia 12th, giving up 100.2 rushing yards per game. Georgia is averaging 4.7 yards a carry, while Texas is averaging 3.9 yards per carry. This is the third time in the last year that these two teams have been against each other. The first time, Georgia dominant on the road. And then the second time, the SEC championship game, Carson Beck leaving with injury. Gunnar Stockton, he did enough to lead Georgia to victory. I went back and forth on this game. I do know without a doubt the extra week to prepare advantaged Texas. But Georgia, they do great at home. And Georgia, they have been resilient no matter how many times that they looked vulnerable this season. I'm going to go with Georgia to win, but only by 3 points. I think that this is going to be a very defensive game, not much scoring. This feels like a 20-17 type of game. And that will do it for my Week 12 college football predictions. That was the main 7 for this week. My NFL picks will be uploaded tomorrow. Best of the rest, Wednesday or Thursday. Takeaways from college football and the NFL this week will be on YouTube Shorts later in the week. Thank you for tuning in. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support means everything to me. And until next time, have a good one.